So, honest confession here, I was on a holiday past weekend and that just meant I didn't have enough time to work on my next analysis video, so I decided instead of getting stressed and overworking myself, I just make a short, chatty video, something a bit more casual, and I talk about Blue Lock a bit more. Hello, my name is Sean, and today I'll be discussing my top 5 Blue Lock characters. So, starting with number 5, Meguru Bachira. Now, I don't want to be talking about Bachira too much since I'm planning to do a dedicated Bachira character analysis in the foreseeable future. But just to say a few things, what I like about Bachira, so he's the first friend Isagi really makes in Blue Lock, and he's always presented as the trailblazer. He's always the one who's seeing further than everyone else. He injects energy and fun into the series, but he's also the first to see opportunities. When everyone else is dejected, when everyone else feels like there's no hope or can't see forward, it's Bachira every time who goes for it afterwards. He's the one who actually enjoys football most of anyone else in the series, it seems, and he just loves playing. And with that, he's fueling his team, he's moving them forward. And especially with Isagi, I love the dynamic between the two of them, the way they just bounce off each other and keep pushing each other up to further heights. And more than that, I think for the second selection, the moment that really gave it this sense of threat, this sense of stakes, is when Isagi lost Bachira. Because at the start of the arc, we get the duo again. They team up immediately, and this seems like something that's just going to be a continuation of the dynamic in the first selection of Team Z. And then suddenly Bachira is torn away, and that really gives us the impression that everything is going to go downhill from here, that Isagi has actually lost something substantial. I don't think most anyone actually expected Bachira to be lost within one match of this new arc. So that suddenly made all these expulsions, all these threats of the second selection feel much more real to us. So moving on to number 4, and I figure this will be a bit of an unexpected choice, since most readers, I get the impression, focus on the actual football players. But for me, the number 4 player, or I should say, the number 4 character in Blue Lock is Jinpachi Ego. I just love the fact that he's so iconic, that he's got this presence, this design that absolutely entices you. From his body frame, his face, his mannerisms, he's got this lanky posture, this fish-eyed stare, this crane-like neck. He's got this silhouette in Chapter 1, which makes him seem like a Cheshire cat with that smile. What I love about his appearance in Chapter 1 is that he starts off as this fairly normal, nerdy-looking guy, and then he transitions to something that's completely unhinged, almost threatening, and that really sets the tone. When he's confronted by Kira, we just see him spiral out of control, bending backwards. He becomes like almost sadistic, taking pleasure in humiliating these kids. We've got this sense that we're confronted by an absolute psychopath suddenly. I think for me, that Chapter 1 was really when I got hooked to Blue Lock, and it's through Ego. It's because you want to find out more about this outrageous plan of his. This plan to make football revolve around egoism, about just having one fantastic striker rather than teamwork. It just feels daring. It feels like a slap in the face of everything that sports manga are about. And Ego is the character who's really representing this. He's the first sign that Blue Lock will be something that's larger than life as well. Since with Isagi and Kira, we get these fairly normal-looking teenagers. They're just standard shonen fare at first sight. But then we get Ego, and with his design alone, that you get the impression that we're being brought into a completely new world. He's this almost alien figure, and I think that's really represented quite well with the way that he's opening this door. This is like the door to another world, to another reality almost, that he's just holding open for you, and you can choose to go in. And it's not just Chapter 1, because he always manages to steal the show whenever he's on the page. What I think Blue Lock does quite cleverly is using him sparingly enough that it's exciting when he actually appears and when he unveils some new insights. I think it's really good that he's not this commentator, this constant figure who's always giving his views on what's going on. We actually don't really know what's going on in Ego's head. Maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we ever actually get his thoughts in the series. That we are never allowed access into his head like with many of the other Blue Lock players, right? And all that means that every time he does appear, every time he does say something, we immediately know that this is going to be important. This will be a key to the progress in the match, in the arc, whatever. He's going to give you the puzzle pieces to progress further. I think it's amazing that Blue Lock also pulls off this smart character successfully, and it's doing it by showing, not telling. Now realize smart characters are some of the most difficult ones to write, because after all, the writer actually has to make what they do feel smart. As Blue Lock unfolds, you really get this sense that you're following a mastermind, unveiling their grand plan. I think that's a strength of Blue Lock in general, this idea that there's some progression, that all these concepts that are being introduced are building onto each other and showing us finally this true idea, this true plan. But Ego is the one through whom this is all presented, and that just makes him such an interesting figure to me. So then moving on to number 3, which is Comrade Oliver Aiku. I think Aiku pulls off two things that on paper seem really difficult to pull off. First of all, Blue Lock is a series about being an absolute psychopath striker, about being a pure egoist and trying to score all goals. So with that, the idea of having a defender is already kind of lame, right? Because being a defender means you're not doing what you're supposed to do as a football player. So how would you in Blue Lock write a convincing defender, someone who feels cool, who feels badass? And second of all, this is something I've talked about in other videos as well, the U20 team is made to represent a failing system, a rotten system, and it's a system that Blue Lock is supposed to break open, to stop. And nevertheless, Aiku is carrying that, and he has to make it somehow seem cool, make the U20 team not just a pushover, not just a joke. Because, and again, I've pointed this out earlier, the whole point of the U20 team is to show that this idea of cooperation is misguided, that you have to be these egoists, and that's why Blue Lock at the beginning of the match, in the first half, just wipes the floor with them immediately. And then U20 has to actually fly in Sai, has to fly in Shido before they get anywhere. So Aiku is this character who's trapped, who's not actually in a team that's supposed to function, and nevertheless, you never get the impression that Aiku is defeated. He's constantly a threat. He's standing there at the end. He's remaining as this wall, this insurmountable presence until the very end of the match. Even when Rin is in his destruction mode, when Rin has spiraled completely, and he's just beating defender after defender, the one character, the one opponent he doesn't just unequivocally defeat is Aiku. And sure, there is still the factor of Aiku getting help, but nevertheless, he's the one wall that's still standing. But at the same time, I also think it's really cool that Aiku shows us something about the strengths of this cooperative mindset, of this thing that Blue Lock just won't be able to achieve with a team full of egoists. Because we go to the first scene where Aiku is introduced, his first moment, and what he's doing is being this total bro. He's sticking up for his teammates because Shido is talking down on them, he's mocking them, and Aiku just has none of it. And he doesn't just take down Blue Lock's number 2, but he does it for the other players on his team. He's doing something that no one in Blue Lock would do, that no one who's raised as a true egoist could ever do. He's someone who genuinely looks out for his team. And that, I think, makes him really cool. It makes him something of unique presence in the story. But at the same time, of course, he's also looking out for the future of Japanese football at large. I really love the almost tragic backstory we get of Aiku. He's the guy who's broken by the system, who's betrayed by the system, and has all the reason to just be resentful and cynical. And yet, he's still holding out hope. He's the first one who actually embraces Blue Lock, who sees what they are, what they represent, and that they could be this fix to the failed football culture. Even though Aiku is framed as essentially the what if for Blue Lock. What if they had not been selected and if they had just been stuck in a system that produces middling strikers? That despite all the setbacks, Aiku still resisted. He still believed, and that he was being unbelievably cool while doing so. Now, of course, we've gotten the whole Metavision stuff in the recent chapters with Aiku, and I'm looking forward to seeing more of him in the current story, in the current match. I really hope that this match will highlight Aiku a bit more. I would love now that he's free from the fetters of the system that broke him to have the flourishing, to maybe even go back to some striker stuff. I'd love for him, and this is purely headcanon, I'm not sure how likely it is, I'd love for him to score a goal and to become the striker he always meant to be in a way. And just added to that, he is the hottest guy in Blue Lock. Fight me. So moving to number 2, we get Blue Lock's very own protagonist, Yoichi Isagi. For me, Isagi is one of the best protagonists in all of shonen manga. What for me makes Isagi stand out among all those others in his genre is that he really successfully straddles this fine line between being cool and being relatable. So what do I mean by this? No matter how you spin it, one of the appeals of shonen manga is just the power fantasy, right? This idea of someone defeating a much more powerful foe and becoming stronger over the course of the story. But at the same time, just being powerful is not enough to make you a really great protagonist. But it's this combination of being relatable and yet cool that really makes Isagi stand out for me. So at the start of the series, he seems like this fairly normal, down-to-earth guy. And he's still arguably the most normal person among all the psychopaths that make up Blue Lock's casts. Even his egoism is fairly simple. It's not this tragic, complex backstory. He just wants to be someone to score goals. He's someone who is regretful that he passed at one point because he knew he could do it. And I think that's something all of us can relate to in a way. I think that most everyone at some point in their life would have wanted to be able to conform less to the expectations of society and those around them. That's what makes it so fulfilling to see Isagi, this relatively normal guy, be given a chance of a lifetime to actually do that, to actually unleash his ego, to do the things that we are told we can never do. And then there's the nature of his powers, or, powers, whatever you want to call them. It's not just that Isagi's ability, his exceptional spatial awareness, is fairly unique for a shonen protagonist. But I think more generally, Isagi is framed as the smart guy, right? He's the guy who's slightly more clever than everyone else. That's how he keeps winning, how he keeps succeeding. And I think that makes him quite relatable to a wide audience. Because I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of people feel that they are maybe just a bit smarter than the average Joe, and they harbor this fantasy of outwitting their rivals, of being this absolute mastermind, this chess player. Because let's be real, there's characters who are cool for being strong, or fast, or skilled with all these high-level techniques. And that might be exciting, and we might root for them, but I figure that there are way less readers who could see themselves in the shoes of someone like Barou, or Chigiri, or Nagi. But being clever, being someone who's observant, that's something we can actually imagine ourselves doing as well. But wouldn't it be cool to just see slightly more of the playing field and see what everyone else is doing and read their desires and manipulate that? And that really feeds into the way that we watch Isagi's development as well, which I think is just incredibly rewarding. For one, Isagi's growth constantly feels earned. We never get the sense that he's pulling some new trick out of his hat. We always understand what he learns, why that matters, and how he does what he does. With Isagi, we see just this steady progression of everything he learns, and everything is constantly feeding into each other. So we feel, when we're reading Blue Lock, like we are starting to understand football a bit better, like we could actually be a better player. And of course, I don't say that you're actually going to be a better player by reading Blue Lock. That's ludicrous. You have to actually practice and get out. But Blue Lock succeeds in making you feel that way. It's just so incredibly rewarding to see Isagi overcome these much more powerful, much more skilled opponents by being clever. And that's fundamentally a very fulfilling fantasy. So then that leaves us with my number one character. I think most readers coming into Blue Lock have this assumption that it won't follow through on its promise of actually having the characters become relentless egoists. We all somewhere believe, or I think a lot of readers somewhere believe that in the end, the manga will just give us the power of friendship, that in the end it's going to be about working together and harmony, and that egoism is something that has to be eradicated. That was definitely the case for me when I first started this series. But I can pinpoint the moment when the manga actually made me believe that it could actually follow through on this, that it could be doing something unique for a sports manga. It's the third match of the second selection, the one where Isagi and Nagi and Barou face off against Kunigami, Chigiri, and Reo. The central conflict of this match is actually one within Isagi's own team. We have this over-the-top character with a completely ludicrous philosophy. We have Barou who won't pass no matter what, because he believes he's the king of the playing field. In any way you think about it, it's completely stupid, right? And it's predictable how devastating consequences this has for Barou and Isagi and Nagi, for the entire team. That having this completely dysfunctional player is just ruining every chance they have. And this is contrasted against the opponents who are highly coordinated, who all know what they're supposed to do and are making each other more powerful. So everything about this setup seems to suggest that this will be the death knell for any belief in egoism that you might have. This would be the moment where Barou would have to learn to become a member of a team, to submit his ego to the benefits of the team at large. And then, instead, we get something completely different. There is no power of friendship. There is no working together. Instead, we get Isagi devouring Barou. We get this moment where Isagi uses the fact that everyone assumes that Barou is useless to his advantage, and he starts manipulating his own teammates. It's not them cooperating, but it's this seemingly dysfunctional clash of egos, this one-upmanship, this team that shouldn't be able to work, actually working and actually winning the match. This was when I knew that Blue Lock was something special, that I might have to take it seriously as a manga about relentless egoism. The moment where he calls Barou a loser, a response to everything that Barou has told him, all the ways that he has been derated by Barou since the start of the series, it's just so fulfilling, so rewarding. And then it's not over. We see Barou crumble, and then we get this over-the-top scene of this guy with such a great ego that he believes that because he passed to Isagi this one time, his career is over. He's just going to sit there as a loser, watch Isagi become number one. That realization causes Barou to snap, and he essentially goes Super Saiyan. He tears the field apart, all in this frustration about having passed one single time. Long story short, what I just love about Barou, what makes him my absolute undeniable number one of Blue Lock, is that he is the most pure egoist in the series. He's the one who makes himself king, who believes that everyone else is supposed to serve him and make him number one. from the very first moment he's introduced in the series, he's, you know, the first main antagonist of Isagi, the first main antagonist of Blue Lock. He's this insurmountable threat, this pure force of violence and physicality. And when we compare his appearance from the beginning of the manga, where he's a bit taller, he's a bit more muscular, to later points, and he just transforms into this Hulk-like figure. He's this massive flesh who's just waiting to tear you apart. Like, I love how Blue Lock has made him this threat for the entire series. Like, he's someone who, even if Isagi might outwit him, Isagi's never seemingly going to catch up with Barou. He's never going to surpass this sheer force of nature. And that Blue Lock is doubling down on it by giving Barou this lion motif now, the king of beasts, to manifest not just that he is, you know, this king, but also that he's violent, dangerous, ready to tear you apart, to sink his fangs into you. My favorite moment in the U20 match is when Barou is brought in as this final substitution, the wild card, the person that not even Ego can predict what he will do. And he's just throwing this match, the entire field, into confusion. And just every moment when Barou appears, he is threatening. He is the center of attention. Let's be real, Blue Lock is this over-the-top series with all these larger-than-life characters. And yet, like, Barou is the most pure version of that. He's this figure you just can't believe exists. He's the, you know, football player who won't even pass. That just sums up something I really love about Blue Lock that makes it so unique as a sports series. The way it's so over the top. And at the same time, what I also really like is that Blue Lock puts in the effort to humanize him. To say, well, you know, we have this over-the-top character, this person who won't pass, who sees himself as king, and actually thinks about, okay, but how will such a person function outside the playing field? And that Blue Lock's solution is that he has such a strict routine, that he's incredibly disciplined, strict to himself, maybe more so even than to everyone else. I'm not sure if it humanizes him because he's still larger than life, but it makes you think about him in a different light as well. So that's it for my top 5. This is definitely not like a list of who I think are the most skilled players in Blue Lock, but the ones I just love seeing on the page most, the ones I enjoy reading about and following and want to see their developments. And if you want more in-depth manga analysis every other week, more Blue Lock, but also other manga, do consider subscribing to the channel.